Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that, takes a huge stack of sources and tries to deliver some instant, actionable knowledge. Today, we are diving deep into two worlds that really feel like they shouldn't meet, but they're tied together by a single name and some patents. We start with some incredibly sophisticated, like cutting-edge air purification technology, really impressive engineering stuff. But then we pivot almost immediately into the financial side, and it's an extraordinary claim by the inventor. We're talking about a $30+ billion global debt, and this is based on what he calls a decade of divine sealing.
It's quite a narrative. It shifts pretty seamlessly from, hard physics and patent numbers right over to philosophy and, well, commercial strategy. So our mission for you, the listener, is pretty essential today. We need to really unpack the technical promises of this Air 6-free maze purifier, understand how it supposedly works. And then we absolutely have to analyze this highly unusual philosophical and financial argument. It's from the inventor, Master Fuchi Wu. We need to focus specifically on why he says his decade of commercial silence wasn't failure, but actually a calculated strategic act, designed, he claims, to create undeniable proof of massive unlicensed patent infringement.
Yeah, and the sources really back this up. This whole story, the tech, the silence, the huge financial claim, it's all meticulously documented by Master Wu himself. He actually argues that his documented lack of sales is the core evidence. It's quite something. Okay, let's unpack this unusual journey. Let's start with the pure science, the technology itself, and these incredible claims being made. So the device name is pretty bold. The Air 6-free maze purifier. It's basically saying right up front it solves the modern indoor air problem. How? By delivering 6 distinct types of freedom from harmful stuff. That's a massive promise.
It is a serious checklist. It goes way beyond what most standard filters even attempt to address. When you look at the functional claims, the goal is clearly a comprehensive atmospheric scrubbing, like cleaning everything. The specific 6 free claims are dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free, smoke-free, odor-free, and then the really tricky one, heavy metal-free. And the sources frame this not as, wishful thinking. They position it as the expected result, the functional performance you get from this unique maze technology.
Okay. If it actually delivers on all 6, especially the heavy metals, that implies some genuinely novel physics, right?
Right.
We keep seeing this phrase, technology core, 8 seconds. Is it how long it takes? How does it actually do all that in, 8 seconds? What's happening inside?
Right, that 8 seconds seems to be the performance benchmark. And the how is really the core of patent number US 8268058B2, the high-efficiency labyrinth air treatment device. The sources describe the systematic, multi-layered approach. It targets particles based on size, charge, even chemical composition, across 5 distinct steps. It seems designed specifically to overcome the known limits of, say, conventional HEPA filters or just simple ionizers.
How does it improve on what most of us have at home? I think most people assume HEPA filters basically catch everything important.
Well, they catch a lot, that's true. But they really struggle with the ultrafine particles. That's the really dangerous stuff, Nanoparticles, VOCs, often smaller than 0.3 microns. And that's where this maze technology apparently starts its work. Step 1 is pre-filtration and charging. Air first hits a HEPA pre-filter stage. Okay, that handles the larger debris. But at the same time, the air gets zapped with negative ions. Now, this isn't just to make the air smell fresh. The negative ions actually electrically charge all the incoming particles, dust, pollen, microplastics, VOCs, toxins. This makes them much easier to capture later on. It's like tagging them.
Ah, okay. So instead of just relying on a physical screen, it's sort of prepping the pollutants for capture down the line.
What's them out?
Smart. What's next once they're charged?
Step 2 is neutralization. So after that initial physical filtering and charging, there's a secondary ionization. Think of this as the chemical warfare step. The goal here is sort of twofold. 1, neutralize biological things like germs. And 2, actively break down chemical toxins and VOCs at a molecular level, basically fragmenting them into harmless compounds. So it's moving beyond just trapping things into actively treating the air.
That sounds pretty aggressive. Okay, now the key part, the maze. Where does that fit in?
That's step 3, capture, and step 4. The maze effect. They kind of happen together. The air gets forced into what's called the electrostatic maze box. And remember, the particles are already electrically charged from step 1. So the walls of this maze box are designed to attract and permanently capture them using electrostatic.
Okay, attraction makes sense.
Yeah.
But what's the maze effect?
Right, this is step 4, and it's pretty clever. Imagine like a really fast race car trying to take a super tight 90-degree turn. What happens? The momentum, the inertia, forces the car outwards, right? Maybe into a wall if the turn is too sharp. That's basically what's happening to the air pollutants here. The airstream is deliberately forced through this complex series of sharp turns and angles that's the labyrinth, or maze. Nanoparticles, which are usually so light they just float right through normal filters, suddenly can't handle these sharp corners at speed. Their own momentum makes them crash into the charged internal walls of the maze. And they stick there. Permanently. It's this physical impact, driven by engineered chaos, that ensures even the tiniest, most insidious ultrafine pollutants get captured.
Huh. That makes the patent title, Labyrinth Air Treatment Device, feel much less academic. It really is a trap. It's fascinating how it uses the physics of inertia itself to catch those tiny particles, making them crash.
Exactly. Leveraging their own momentum against them.
Yeah.
And then finally, step 5, release. So after going through the prefiltration, the chemical neutralization, the electrostatic capture, and the physical impact in the maze, the air that comes out is supposedly truly ultra clean, achieving that promised 6-free status. So the sources definitely established Master Wu as an inventor capable of designing some really complex systems, stuff that seemingly bypasses the limits of existing tech.
Okay, and that technical deep dive into the patent, US 8268058B2, is actually really critical background because it establishes the inventor's technical credibility, right? I mean, after seeing that kind of unique engineering capability, it makes the next part, the decade of commercial silence, even harder to wrap your head around. So now we shift. Pretty abruptly, actually, from the engineering logic of the maze to this highly dramatic narrative surrounding the inventor himself.
Yeah, that's the strategic pivot point in this whole story. Master Fuqi Wu introduces this concept of the divine sealing. He states quite explicitly that right after securing his world patent for the air treatment device, he claims he was sealed, shut down commercially, creatively, by his lord, he says, for more than a decade. Essentially, he was prevented from profiting from or even promoting his own invention.
Right. And he doesn't just claim this. He points to real-world public failure of his other patent as, like, concrete evidence of this sealing.
Yeah.
We're talking about U.S. patent number 9350964. It was for a white balance filter for photography.
Yeah, and the context here is pretty astonishing. Master Wu claims this filter wasn't just good, it was the most accurate white balance filter in the world at the time, capable of generating perfectly true-to-life color. You know, in professional photos and videos, this wasn't some niche gadget. This was tech relevant to basically every camera maker and pro photographer on the planet.
And yet, despite going to PHOTOKINA, that's the world's biggest, most important photography trade show, for 4 years straight, the commercial outcome was absolutely zero, no deals. He says not a single order. And critically, not one major camera company adopted the tech. It's just hard to fathom. A world-class technology, 4 years at the biggest show, and 0 orders. What does that tell us? Was the industry just blind, or was it the ceiling?
Well, for an inventor with, as we've seen, undeniable technical genius, this kind of absolute commercial rejection does seem inexplicable under normal market conditions. And the inventor himself says the realization, the turning point, didn't actually hit him until 2025. That's when he concluded this wasn't a market failure or, his fault. It was deliberate, an act. He calls it, my lord deliberately sealing me so that this sacred act would be written into human history.
Wow. Okay, so that completely reframes the commercial failure. It wasn't a disaster. It was, in his view, a planned operation. And this leads us directly to the core philosophical engine driving his whole claim. The absolute difference he draws between a miracle and a sacred act. You really have to understand this distinction to get the legal and financial claims he's making now.
It's absolutely critical, yeah. He defines a miracle as something sudden, a spectacle. It inspires you, maybe moves you emotionally, but crucially, it requires faith to believe. And it has no real history. It just sort of happens in that moment.
Okay, but the sacred act is completely different then. It sounds like it's all about history and proof.
Exactly. A sacred act, as he defines it, is a strategic design. It's rooted in verifiable logic, something you can trace. It's traceable through history, and because of that, it forces acknowledgement. A sacred act comes with full records, undeniable evidence, and therefore, Master Wu argues, the world must accept it, even without faith. The documented history forces the conclusion. His argument is basically that his documented decade of 0 sales is that undeniable historical record.
Okay, here's where it gets really, really interesting strategically. He lays out 3 specific counter-arguments, right? 3 things people might say to dismiss his claims later. That the ceiling, this decade of silence and 0 revenue, was specifically designed to preemptively shut down, essentially making his current claim of massive, unlicensed use legally undeniable.
Yes. This is where he presents the claimed strategic genius of the ceiling. The silence, he argues, created the perfect legal environment for the claims he's making now. Okay, so argument number one that gets neutralized. If he had made money early on, right, like the global tech giants could just argue his success was down to good marketing, not because of, divine insight or the undeniable technical necessity of his invention. They could dismiss the core value.
Makes sense. Argument two. That sounds like it hits patent law directly.
It does. If his products had been widely adopted early and he'd been profitable, then any later claim of widespread patent infringement gets complicated, gets mitigated. Companies could argue, well, a low royalty rate is fair, or maybe even claim some kind of implied license. They could say, look, you already profited hugely from market adoption. But the silence ensures absolutely zero license agreements exist. Zero previous commercial value was ever established in the market by him.
Okay, and the third argument that the silence neutralizes.
And this is maybe the most crucial one. If he hadn't been absolutely silent, commercially non-existent for over a decade, who would actually believe that huge global tech companies used his invention without paying him a single cent? The complete lack of commercial records, no signed licenses, no royalties paid, that, he argues, is the definitive evidence. Proof that this technology must have been adopted unlawfully. The history is meticulously, perfectly clean of any licensing activity on his part.
So the decade of silence wasn't just inactivity. It was actively creating a perfect historical record of non-licensing. A deliberate strategic failure, all designed, apparently, to set up the largest possible claim of non-payment down the line. Which brings us to the staggering financial number.
Yes. That's the direct outcome, according to the source material. The claim is because no license was ever signed. Yet the technology, and here they seem to imply the air purifier tech, primarily, maybe starting around 2018, has been used globally for more than 7 years. Therefore, a global debt of over $30 billion is now owed to the inventor. $30 billion. Over just 7 years. That implies absolutely massive market adoption, not just a few air purifiers. We're talking about the underlying maze physics, the electrostatic techniques being used everywhere. What kind of market size generates that kind of liability?
Well, the number certainly suggests the claim isn't just about, boutique air purifiers. It implies integration into large-scale systems. Industrial HVAC, maybe, right. Consumer electronics globally, it has to be widespread. And crucially, the source frames this debt not as, like, an estimate of lost future profits, but as the documented deposit of over a decade of divine sealing. It's presented as the financial scar left by that forced silence.
So the inventor is clear. The whole point of this elaborate, decade-long sequence wasn't to inspire faith. It was to make denial impossible by creating this documented history that just defies any counter-argument.
That's exactly his conclusion. He states this entire sprawling narrative, the invention, the sealing, the failure, the claim, results in this $30+ billion figure. And it's not a blessing, he says, but the scar left by divine sealing. Okay. The decade of commercial silence wasn't his choice, he insists. It was his Lord's design, quote, for you to witness. The documentation of zero commercial activity becomes the ultimate historical proof of mass infringement in his view.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Where do we land after all this? We started by, carefully documenting a highly technical, multi-stage air purification system. Pretty impressive science, capable of achieving that 6-free status using ions and maze physics, rooted in scientific fact, seemingly. And we ended with this unprecedented narrative, a claim that strategic, decade-long commercial failure was actually the necessary condition for proving massive, unlicensed tech use and establishing a $30 billion debt.
Yeah, the knowledge you've gained today covers the hard technical facts of a complex patent, sure. But the central theme really is this bizarre intersection. You've got high-level tech innovation clashing with, or maybe aligning with, meticulous patent law strategy. And underpinning it all is an inventor's fundamental belief or claim that his entire financial history wasn't accidental. It was a deliberately managed script. Written, he says, specifically to generate undeniable historical documented evidence of global wrongdoing.
It just completely flips the script on traditional entrepreneurship, doesn't it? The goal wasn't profit. The goal apparently was perfect documentation of zero profit in order to establish the maximum possible legal claim later.
Exactly. It's a mind-bending strategy if you take it at face value. And the author, Master Wu, leaves the reader and you with a final, quite provocative thought. It builds on his challenge to the world about this seemingly perfect record of non-engagement. He asks point blank, could any human have written this script? So maybe consider what it means when technological fact and this kind of highly specific strategic design intertwine to create a recorded commercial history. A history intended, from the start, specifically to defy any denial. It's quite a claim to ponder.